Hello, everybody, and welcome into yet another episode of the Orbit Football Podcast. We're doing our Week 8 preview. Can't believe we're already at Week 8 of the season, but I'm joined by Tyler and Blake once again. We're about to break down some of the top 8 games in the country once again this week. Let's waste no time and let's get into the top one. I know a lot at stake here in this ball game. Big noon, high noon, Columbus, Ohio, the Shoe, Penn State, Ohio State. This is the first of really the round robin of those 3 Big Ten East squads, all of them pretty solidly ranked, all of them very respected, all of them great defenses. This is going to be, a lot of the hype is around it. Big Noon's got all the round robin. This is the first one that we're going to get. Penn State coming off of a big win a big win in the score sense against UMass, and Ohio State looked pretty dominant on the road against Purdue last week, but enough talking about the preview. Let's dive right into it. Tyler, I'll ask you first. What are your thoughts on this game?
So this is obviously going to be the biggest game in the country so far between 2 of the best teams in the country. And when it starts, when I look at it from the start, injury report on Saturday morning is going to be huge. Ohio State dealing with pretty key injuries. Emeka Egbuka, top-end receiver in the country. Looks like he's probably going to be out. Ryan Day's been talking about Carnell Tate. Brandon Ennis getting some play time, which to me just foreshadows that one of them is going to be taking his spot in this game. And Brandon Ennis got some play time last week. Carnell Tate has gotten a little bit of time throughout the season, but not too much. So one of them is probably going to end up making. I don't know if they're going to be starting, but they're going to get some significant play time. So that's going to be one asset of the game I look at. And the other asset for the Ohio State Buckeyes, TreVeyon Henderson, is he going to be playing? We seen in that Notre Dame game, he got that long touchdown, about 60, 70 yards. Not exactly for sure, how long, but his speed and his burst on the, outside the tackles for Ohio State is key. If they're going to roll into this game trying to get, is Mayan Henderson, is Mayan going to be able to, be back in this game? He was also out last week. Chip. If they're trying to run him outside, it's not going to work against this Penn State front. At least I don't think so. He doesn't have the burst to be able to get outside the tackles. But TreVeyon Henderson, one of the best running backs in the country, especially when he gets in open space. That's going to be big, key for the running game for Ohio State. Obviously, have not been the best team at running the ball, but I think with TreVeyon Henderson offers so much to this offense. And defensively, Denzel Burke, number 1 corner, has played extremely well this season. Is he going to be in? Because without him, Penn State's passing offense has not been what it was supposed to be coming into the season. It's been a little bit lackluster, I think, for expectations. But without Denzel Burke, all it takes is one game to be able to get that Penn State passing game rolling. And I think that this could be the game, especially with how big it is. This game is probably going to be won by something that just hasn't happened yet. That's how these kind of games kind of go. Something outside the norm ends up happening and it wins. It tips for one side and the other. And for this one, I think this is going to be a really good game. I think it's going to be really low scoring. I think to look at it, passing is going to win this game. And right now, I just think Ohio State has the weapons to be able to get it done against Penn State. I think Penn State, I'm not going to say their inability to run, but their run game has left a lot to be desired offensively. I think it's the scheming more than anything, but obviously when you have 2 great running backs in that running back duo, probably the best duo in the country, anything can happen. But with this one, I think I've just seen enough from Ohio State to be able to give me the confidence that they're going to be able to pull it out in Columbus. It's going to be everyone's there. It's going to be probably the most watched game of the season, or not the season, but of the week, I should say. I don't know. I'm going to go and pick Ohio State to win. I do think Penn State covers 4.5. I think this game is going to be really close, and I think it might come down to the last play. I have Ohio State beating Penn State 18-16, and what's going to be a really ugly game. Might be raining as well. Who knows? But this game should be a classic.
Yeah, you kind of almost on a similar score there to the Notre Dame game, honestly. And I'll turn it over to Blake now. Blake, I know you've been high on Penn State all off season, all year this year. I know you're big on the Nittany Lions this year. Do we think they can march in and win in Columbus for the first time since 2008 this weekend?
I have been extremely high on Penn State all year long. I came into this season with them as my pick to win the East, actually, over Ohio State. I obviously had them winning this game in the preseason because of that pick. So when I'm looking at this game, what I'm seeing two stellar defenses. There's no question about that. Ohio State has been stout, especially against the run, but really in every sense of the form. They have been an issue for opposing offenses. Penn State the same way though. Penn State, has shut out Iowa. Not necessarily the biggest feat of all time, but still was an impressive showing in what was a downpour and ugly football game to see. But they've looked great against all competition this year. What this game is going to really come down to here, I think, is a couple of big things. Ohio State, yes, is it going to take them throwing the ball? Obviously, of course, Penn State's got a great corner duo outside there, though, with Dixon and King. So Ohio State, yes, they're going to have to throw the ball on them. But what I think is going to be more important than anything is, can Ohio State unleash the legs of either Kyle McCord or Devin Brown in some senses? I think that there's going to have to be some sense of run game for Ohio State for them to come out on top of this one. I think it's going to have to be with the quarterback, because I don't see any way, well, not any way per se, but I don't see Ohio State's rushing attack breaking out this week with just the running backs available. It hasn't happened all year. I don't think it's going to happen this weekend. It's going to have to come from the quarterback position, either designed, scrambles, otherwise. Ohio State's going to have to run the quarterback to be successful this weekend. On the opposite side of the ball there with Penn State, though, and their offense, Penn State's offense, from what I expected, has definitely been lackluster. But what I see is a team that can still take another step up. This Penn State offense has not hit the level that they can play at. I have no doubt about that. What the question becomes is, are they going to find that next level against a great defense at Ohio State, especially one where they, like I said, have been very stout against the run. And when you think about this Penn State offense, their potential really comes in their ability to step up in the run game to the next level, from being just very solid to being explosive. It's going to be tough, certainly. I think they can, though, and I don't. They don't have to go to their max potential by any means this weekend. Now against Michigan in a couple of weeks, that might be a different story. But against Ohio State, they don't have to be at their max potential, but they have to be better in the run. Drew Aller also cannot make mistakes this weekend. Penn State's been great at not turning the football over all year long. When we think about this game last year, obviously that kind of became the issue for Penn State at the end there. Ohio State pulled away because Penn State, Sean Clifford turned the football over in key situations. JT Tuimoloau took over this game for Ohio State. Penn State's got to hold on to the football. If they play a clean game, which obviously you can't really predict turnovers in this sense, but if they can play a clean game here, I think they stand a great chance to take this one out. And honestly, I think I'm going to take it here. I think Penn State's rushing attack is going to find that next level. Like I said, I don't think it's going to be their max potential spot at all, but I think it's going to be a good enough level to succeed. And I think they're going to keep the football, clean. I think they're going to limit their turnovers like they've done all year. They've looked great at it. I think they're going to continue to do it. I'm going to take Penn State to win this game, and it's going to be a close one. I'm going to take it 28-23 for them to take kind of that early lead in the East.
Yeah, you both bring up really good points about this game, and honestly, I feel like a mix on this game of both points. I think this is going to be a pretty clean football game in the sense that we're not going to have very many turnovers. Because yes, there are two great defenses, but when you've paid attention to these teams this year, for Ohio State first, I'll detail them. Kyle McCord this year is a pretty solid college quarterback. He's, I don't think he's found his stride yet, but he's been playing very, very well over the past couple weeks. I still think there's more there for him to really hit on for the rest of the season, but I mean, he's still playing great, which is, great for him, because a lot of people in the, first couple games of the season were sitting there and saying, well, Kyle McCord's not going to be able to lead this team. Kyle McCord's not going to be able to lead this team. Kyle McCord did lead this team. He led the team in South Bend about a month ago, and he's going to try to lead them again against Penn State. Tyler brings up a lot of good points for Ohio State in this game when it comes to injuries. Denzel Burke went down last weekend. That's a big loss. Denzel Burke arguably has been one of the better, if not the best, cornerback playing this year in all of college football, period. He's had a great year, which is very shocking to see from an Ohio State fan like myself, because Denzel Burke last year was nothing near like Denzel Burke this year. But he's questionable for this game. Like you said, Egbuka, he's sitting there and he's looking on the outside, looking in, not sure if he's going to be playing, which is a big loss for them, because if you paid attention to that Notre Dame game a month ago, I mean, Marv went down with a little bit of an injury. Marv got his own in that game, but Egbuka was really the receiver that broke out in that ball game. So, that's an interesting thing to keep an eye on moving forward as about him. But, obviously TreVeyon Henderson's been out past 3 weeks, really, with the bye. He has not seen the field then, which is interesting for Ohio State because I think he's the X factor in this offense for the way that he can attack on the outside. But if he's out, what are you going to do at tailback? I don't think that running the ball will be a solution for this game for either team personally. But I think that having a guy like that in the pass game, the speed that TreVeyon, has in the pass game and can bring on the outside. I mean, he's got big playability. He does. And like Tyler said, he showed that in the Notre Dame game. I think he can show it against Penn State too. They're going to need somebody like that because Ohio State, when they've had success running the football this year, it's been outside the tackles. Cannot run inside the tackles. Chip Trayanum went down with an injury last weekend. Dallin Hayden was the big guy who stepped up. I'm interested to see if Ohio State will use him in this game, depending on availability. But he's been probably, to me personally, I think he might be the most talented running back on this Ohio State roster, which is crazy to say because he hasn't really seen the field much. But the way that he plays is fantastic. I think he's perfect for this Ohio State team in the scheme. He's a very balanced running back. He's a great overall player, and they're not going to use him because they're trying to redshirt him this year. But I'm interested to see what they're going to do in the running back. But the main thing in this ball game for Ohio State is who's going to step up. Like you said, obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. is out there wide, and Marvin Harrison Jr. last year absolutely torched this Penn State defense. But that was with a different Ohio State offense. He had a guy, that'll be the guest picker on game day this weekend with a rocket right arm, C.J. Stroud, or as we like to call him around this part, Coleridge by his real first name. But Stroud was a guy who could spread out that Ohio State offense. That's the Ohio State offense we were used to seeing. I don't think McCord's hit that point yet. I think that McCord has the talent to spread things out. I do. I just don't think he's hit his stride yet. I've seen flashes of it. I've seen it, but it's still not 100% there. But I think Marvin Harrison Jr. will get his own. I don't think he'll torch the Penn State secondary as much as he did last year because, this is still a very good secondary. I think that last year's was better. I think that's a bit of an interesting take, but I think that they had a better secondary last year than they do this year. Obviously, that's the big thing about this year is Kalen King and Johnny Dixon, two guys that are going to be pretty solid cornerbacks when you look at the draft this year. But I still think that they had a better secondary last year, and Marvin Harrison Jr. absolutely torched that secondary, which is interesting to see. We'll keep an eye on in that game who's going to step up for Ohio State. Will it be Stover in the tight end position, who's arguably behind Brock Bowers, been maybe one of the better tight ends in the country this year. Overall, he's had a pretty solid year. Obviously Brock Bowers is Brock Bowers, though. That's a little different. But when it's said and done, he puts up the stats. He could be sitting in a situation where he could be winning the Mackey this year, could Cade Stover. The Ohio State's used him a lot. He's been a good target for them. But can he step up? Can Carnell Tate step up? He had a good weekend last weekend. Same with Brandon Inniss. Can one of these guys step up that's going to be in the slot for Ohio State in that position where they use Egbuka? That's a big thing for the Buckeyes. But I'll turn it over to Penn State now. Obviously, they have probably the most talented backfield duo. I want to say backfield period in the country with Katron Allen and Nick Singleton. When you look at this team and you look at that, those two guys are absolutely amazing. And their other sophomore counterpart in that backfield, Drew Aller. Tyler and I, actually probably all three of us are pretty familiar with Drew Aller, being an Ohio kid himself up there in Medina, was absolutely torching things up there. A 5-star recruit, went to Penn State, and he's probably their most talented quarterback that they've had there since maybe like Todd Blackledge. Seriously, I think that it could be said. Obviously, they haven't got the passing game going this year. They got a really big transfer that I know Tyler and I were high on, Dante Cephas from Kent State. He's been super quiet this year. Their really main receiving target is Keandre Lambert-Smith. That's been the only guy that's got receiving yards this year. I believe he's the only guy with over 300 receiving yards or 200 receiving yards this year for this Penn State team. That's a problem because who's going to win this game? Or how are the teams going to win this game? It's going to be throwing the football. I think both of these run defenses are going to be tough. I think both teams are going to have trouble running the ball. And it comes down to who's going to throw the ball. And I agree with Tyler here. I sit there and I look who's got more talent on the outside to be able to in the receiving cores and when you feature in the running backs, when you feature in everything, who's got the most talent out there in those skill positions? And it's Ohio State. And when you got a guy like Marvin Harrison Jr. and you got like 4 other guys that are 5 stars and probably NFL talents one day, it's hard to beat a team like that, even with a quarterback that isn't C.J. Stroud or Dwayne Haskins or Justin Fields. McCord's been fine. And I think I'm going to say the same thing I said about the Notre Dame game. If he can keep things clean, I think Ohio State wins this football game. But if there's a turnover or 2 in there from Kyle McCord, that's a problem for the Buckeyes. That's going to be a big problem for the Buckeyes. But I think that this game's going to be very low scoring. I think the defenses are going to show. I really like Penn State this year, but like I've said this all year, I think they're just a year for them. We got to wait one more year for this team. And I think we're going to be waiting. I think Ohio State right now, I think this team is hitting its stride. I think this team is starting to realize that, hey, we're a very talented football team, and we are trying to reach that elite level. I don't think that we've seen flashes of teams reaching that elite level. The only team that I think has possibly been elite, for a while now is Michigan. But I think Ohio State's trying to sit there and say, we can be elite, but we can be elite against other good competition. And I think that the Buckeyes are going to be able to do that this weekend. I don't know. I just think when you factor that in, when you factor the fact that Penn State has not beat them in Columbus since 2008 when Joe Paterno was their head coach, which seems like a very long time ago, factor a lot of those things in, factor what we talked about the game, factor how this game is going to play out and how I think it's going to play out, and I think it's going to go Ohio State's way. I got the Buckeyes in this one 20-10, low-scoring game. I do have them covering. Funny enough, I think I'm the only one of us that has them covering. But, I'm going with the Buckeyes in this one. I have them covering in this ball game. Obviously, as Tyler said, most tuned-in football game that'll be this weekend, biggest game on the slate. But to another talking point, and sticking in the Big Ten East, let's talk about Michigan for a second. News came out today. We're recording this on Thursday. This will be released on Friday. But news came out today that the Wolverines are currently being investigated by the NCAA due to a sign-stealing scandal. So basically what I read up and what I saw today is that Michigan is currently being investigated by the NCAA because they hired an unnamed person who is not to go to opposing teams later in their schedule, go to their games and be in game and look at their sideline and get their signs, whether it be offensive or defensive signs. And the NCAA has found, and the Big Ten have been quoted as saying they have found very strong evidence to suggest that Michigan has been doing this. And by NCAA bylaws, they are in violation, Michigan is, of NCAA bylaws for this, because you're not physically allowed to have somebody there for future opponents. That is the rule due to the NCAA. And it got almost to the point where Michigan State this weekend, Michigan's opponent, almost canceled their game and pulled out of it this weekend because they claimed, as that's what they said in their statement, due to health and safety issues. But the game will go on as said. But very interesting here for Michigan. I know there's a lot of talk about, well, everybody else does it. Why doesn't everybody else does it? So why is Michigan getting burned for it? Maybe everybody else is just slicker than Michigan is, and that could be it there too. There's a lot of good arguments for this, but Michigan's still got a ball game to play, and Michigan has been a very, very, very good football team this year, taking on Michigan State in East Lansing, NBC night game. Unfortunately, have to deal with that production of a football game to watch. But Tyler, how are we thinking about this Michigan game? Do we think outside factors are going to have a play in this game, as they already, went through that Harbaugh situation at the beginning of the year?
No, I think this game's going to be close. Truthfully, if we're going to go behind the scenes, we wanted to talk about Michigan. Not necessarily because of this, but this just happened to break out the day of recording. We wanted to talk about Michigan. We wanted to get them on the show because we just haven't talked about them all year. We literally have not talked about Michigan except for our top 25 segments on our reviews for the prior week. So we wanted to get Michigan on the show. This is a big rivalry game. One of the best rivalries in college football when both teams are at its peak, but Michigan State is just nothing near its peak. And that program is such in a bad shape, and I think there's a reason why they were talking about canceling their game. It wasn't because of this. It's just because they did not want to get embarrassed by Michigan. Last year, they get embarrassed on the field and after they assault Michigan players. This is This is just a Michigan State team that is. I don't think they're going to be. They're not going to be competitive. I don't think Michigan's going to blow them out. I do think Michigan State is going to break the trend of being able to score 7 or more points against a Michigan defense, but I just don't think this game is going to be close. I have it 38-10 Michigan. Michigan's just way too talented. They're one of the best teams in the country. This is going to be interesting to see how Michigan responds. Obviously, Michigan, they will ride or die for Jim Harbaugh. We've seen that in the first 3 weeks of the season when they had shirts and everything, claiming for the innocence and the comeback of their head coach who took a 3-game suspension, which is funny enough. But this game's not going to be competitive. It's not going to be close. I think the more question is, can Michigan State cover 24 points at home? I think it's going to be really hard, and I have Michigan covering 38-10. Should be fun to talk about Michigan in 2 or 3 weeks. That Penn State game is going to be fun, and it could be the biggest game of the season if Penn State could pull it off. But I don't see anything the Spartans can do to upset Michigan here.
Yeah, you bring up some good points there about the on-field of this game. Blake, I'll turn it over to you now. As we said, talking about Michigan now, trying to talk about them really for the first time this year. But what are your thoughts heading into this game and on Michigan in general?
So for the off the field stuff, I'll start with I think this is actually going to have an effect on Michigan, but I don't think it's going to be in the way that most people would immediately expect. I think when something like this will come out, especially midseason, this can do one of two things to a locker room. It can really hit a locker room hard. It can kind of bring the overall morale down, and you can see kind of a lackluster performance, or it can do the opposite. It can rejuvenate an entire locker room. It can give you that shot in the rear end, and it's going to absolutely light up a team. And the way we've seen Michigan respond all year to the stuff early in the season that was mentioned with Harbaugh, everything screams that that's going to be what happens here. This Michigan team will ride or die for Jim Harbaugh, and which is what you want to see out of a team. And honestly, I think this news breaking, especially going into a rivalry game against the cross-state opponent here, it's just fuel to a fire of a Michigan team that's playing great football and has a lot to go into this game with, especially after last year's events in the tunnels post game. This is going to be not a close football game in any regard. So to turn to the on the field stuff here, Michigan's just an incredible football team. As of this week, I'm with Tyler here, where they are, I think, the best team in the country. They've surpassed Ohio State as of the moment in time. They've just been playing lights out nonstop. They can run the football well. JJ's looked great through the air. That he can even use his legs on the ground himself. Their defense has just been incredible. It might be, and I think probably is, the best defensive unit in the country. Michigan State stands no chance here. They are going to get obliterated at home. Sorry to the Spartans here. It's a program in disarray. A coach who's been fired for some not great off the field situations here, who's also going to continue to fight the university. It's a mess in East Lansing, and it's going to show on the field here with a team in Michigan that's been absolutely lit up by this news. I've got it 34-0. I think the Spartans get blanked. I think Michigan continues to roll, and I think there's going to be people tuned into this game because of what we heard this week, and I think they're going to see how good this Michigan team is. I think you're going to see some more respect for the Wolverines going into this next week.
Yeah, you bring up some good points there about maybe this, the situation that's happening could light a fire under Michigan for a sense, but also you both bring up good points where Michigan's just a better football team than Michigan State. Simple way around it. That's a simple way to talk about this game. Michigan's a better football team than Michigan State. I think that. We all think that. None of us really disagree with that. You two have Michigan at your number one. I flirted with the idea, but I want to see one more week. I want to see this weekend play out, especially with the other two Big Ten East teams. I will say, though, that my new, probably speaking, you never know what can happen in a college football season, but I will say that my new number one, I will probably have a new number one next week, and it probably will be one of these three Big Ten East teams. I think I've had them all three at the top of the country this year, in the top 5 for a majority of this year. I stand by that. I think that they're three very good football teams, and, part of me, for the reason of why, I've had Michigan. I had Michigan at my number one for a majority of the start of the season, and then we switched it up. Tyler and I did around week 4, and we finally switched it and said, okay, who are we going to go with now? And Michigan looked okay in those first 4 weeks, and I just kind of kept him around like 5-4-ish. They've looked good. They have looked good in the weeks since, and I will give them that. Michigan is a good football team. I'm not going to take that away from them. I think they're obviously, they're probably the most physical team in the country. They're going to grind you down. That's how this team is. That's how I've seen this team. It's the same Michigan teams that we saw the past 2 years. I just think that this year, though, it's to a different level. It's to a level where they're almost like a team that, in all honesty, when it's all said and done here in about 2-3, after that Penn State game, Michigan could be decent favorites to win the national championship game. And they could be, favored by a good bit over Ohio State, too, whenever that game does occur at the end of the season. But, Michigan, they've been rolling, and I expect them to continue rolling. I think that they're a good football team. I'm not going to sit here and say they're not a good football team. I think that I understand the argument. I can see the argument that they're the best team in the country. Like I said, I flirted with the idea myself. They're a good football team, and I think they're going to show it this Saturday against Michigan State. They're just going to continue to roll. I'm going to go Michigan 48-17 in this one. I do think that they cover. I think they take care of business. I think there might be a little bit more garbage time situations for Michigan State here, or maybe a first drive where they just kind of catch Michigan a little on their toes because it's an away game, it's a night game, whatever it may be. That Michigan State does, similar to what Indiana did last week, honestly, against Michigan. So, that's how I got it. But I got a 48-17. I got Michigan in this one. And now to yet another rivalry matchup. Folks, look at your calendars right now. It is it's the third Saturday in October, and you know what that means. It's time for Tennessee-Bama. Last year, wow, what a game it was in Neyland. Tennessee upset Bama. Was a fantastic finish. They were throwing goalposts into the river. Tennessee looked like a legit contender, and Bama, things happened to Bama, and things continue to happen to Bama. But this game is a bit interesting this year. It's not going to be the high scoring. I don't think all three of us think, specifically, I'll give a little nod to Blake here, think that it's going to be the high scoring affair it was last year. But I believe all three of us do think this is going to be competitive. I'll start with you, Tyler, though. I want to get your thoughts on this game.
So I actually have the highest scoring game out of all three of us. This is going to be an interesting game to watch because this is going to be, when we were talking about Tennessee Alabama last year, it was 52-49 final, and now is it's the complete opposite. The offenses are the issue here, and I shouldn't say issues, but that's not the strongest part of either of these two teams. Alabama's defense has been phenomenal this year. They've been outstanding, both against the pass and the rush. Specifically the rush, they have been locked down up front. And same with Tennessee. They have been very good. They are very successful on defense. And they won last week when Joe Milton had, quite frankly, just a very not good game at all. And they dropped 20 points and they beat A&M. They held them to 13. This is gonna be a fun game to watch because I think it's gonna be. The winner of this game is going to be turnover margin. Whoever wins the turnover battle, I think that's who's going to win this game. And when I look at this, I think Joe Milton is a little bit more sporadic in the passing game. I think, yes, he has the big arm, but Alabama defensively, they are not letting up anything very deep. Where they do get beat is in an intermediate game. And Joe Milton's going to have to make those throws. I think that Tennessee is going to try to rely on the run game. The run game is going to be an interesting matchup, just considering how both these teams are offensively and defensively on the rush unit. Tennessee's pass rush is going to be big as well. Alabama's offensive line, we know the issues there. They've gotten better, but still not at a point to where it's an Alabama offensive line and pass protection. This game, when we started recording, I didn't know which way to lean. But I think I found my lean, and I think it's going to be the point that Alabama defensively, I think they're too good. I think Tennessee's, I just don't think Tennessee's going to be able to get an offense going. I don't think they have the athletes to beat Alabama, especially with Brew McCoy out. That is a huge miss because not just in the receiving game, Brew McCoy is a very good. He's very good at blocking, especially downfield, and I think they're going to miss that against Alabama. I think Alabama, I'm not going to predict turnovers. It's really hard to predict turnovers, but I think Alabama's going to be able to get some really good starting field position, whether it just be basically off their defense or, getting those turnovers. And I think Alabama's going to win this. I have 27-17, a little bit high scoring. I don't think the offenses are going to be that good. I think it's just going to be a fact of how good the defenses are going to be. But this game, it's going to be one of the most exciting in the SEC. It's probably the biggest SEC game up, that's been played so far. That is going to be played. Tennessee, they're sitting right there in the East. They have all forward momentum. I think a lot of people are starting to talk about that Georgia game and the possibilities, but this is the game they need to win. And Alabama, obviously, already have one loss to Texas, but they have a 2-game lead over everyone in the West. Or, I should say a 1 game, but technically it's 2 because they have the tiebreaker over A&M. So this is going to be... It's for all the marbles in week 8, which sounds crazy, but if Alabama wins this, I don't see a way that they're gonna end up losing the West, and obviously Tennessee, they want to sit pretty and try to beat Georgia and head to the SEC championship.
Yeah, you do bring up some good points with that, and I want to turn it over to Blake, as you said you have the highest scoring. Well, I'm going to turn it over to the guy who has the lowest scoring out of the three of us. Blake, what are your thoughts on this game?
I certainly do have the lowest scoring score or final score in this one to project. And Tyler, early on in his thing there, said that he didn't want to use the word problematic or for the offenses. I will. These offenses are quite problematic, especially on the Alabama side. This Alabama offense concerns me greatly, not just this week, but going forward. They still have LSU on the schedule. They still have Auburn on the schedule at the end of the year. And if they make it to Atlanta at the end of the year, they're going to see either Tennessee again, potentially, or they'll see Georgia. Maybe Missouri sneaks in there. I don't know. But they concern me pretty heavily. The offensive line, yes, they have improved. They are still a lackluster unit, is the nicest word to say. They have not developed nearly to the level I think they need to be a contender on the national title stage by the end of the year. They have been just extremely disappointing overall. Alabama can't run the football quite really at all behind them, and there's been a struggle for Jalen Milroe to keep himself in the pocket at times because they have been run by up front, and Tennessee's going to be able to do that. Tennessee's defensive front has been stellar all year long. You saw it last week against A&M. Of course, A&M's offensive line has had their struggles as well. But they were still able to put pressure on Max Johnson. They got Max Johnson dirty a lot of that game. I think it was well over 50% of the dropbacks for Max Johnson he was pressured on. I believe it was maybe 25 or 26 of 39. Not a good look, but a great look for that Tennessee front. So you're going to see Jalen Milroe under pressure. He's got a lot more mobility than Johnson obviously does. So what can he do when he gets out of the pocket and, can he find men downfield? That's how Bama's been able to win games so far. They've been able to find men downfield with Jalen Milroe extending the play. Is Tennessee going to be able to stop that? That's going to be probably what decides this football game. That's going to be one of the two keys here. It's going to be, can Tennessee stop that downfield play when Milroe is able to extend? And number 2, can Tennessee run the football on the other side here? Tennessee has run the football extremely well all year. They ran it against a great A&M front last week for over 200 yards. They looked great there. But they're going up against a defensive front who has been equally good at stopping the run here in Alabama. It's a great matchup for that, to see how that goes. If Tennessee can't run the football, I don't see any way they win this game. It's just we know at this point in the year Joe Milton's not going to take over a football game as a quarterback. I think we've seen enough here. It's just when you get to a certain point in the season, you know what a team is. We know what Tennessee is. Joe Milton's not going to win this football game for Tennessee, at least through the air. Maybe with his legs, not through the air. It's not going to happen. So if Tennessee can't find a way to run the ball on this Alabama front, this game's not going to be particularly close. But if Alabama can't find the ball downfield, it might not be particularly close there either. It's an ugly football game that I think is going to look just as bad as I am making it sound right now. At the end of the day here, where am I going with this? I'm taking it to be Alabama. We're in Bryant-Denny. They've got to come off of the loss last year, the first time Nick Saban ever lost to Tennessee. I'm going to take the Tide. I'm going to take them 16-9 here. Low scoring affair, ugly affair. If a team hits 20, they're the easy win. I don't see either of them hitting 20, though. This is going to be offense at a premium, or offense is going to be tough to find. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm going to take Bama.
So you're both going with Bama on this one, and I'm going to give a little spoiler alert. I think all three of us are going with Bama in this one. I agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. I think Tennessee will be able to run the ball in this game. I mean, if they could run it on Texas A&M, I think they can run it on Bama. And that's going to be their reasons for success in this game. I think that they're going to be able to move the football in the game. I just don't trust Mr. Joe Milton. He didn't play the best game last weekend. He hasn't played the best football this season. And obviously we kind of talked about, and Tyler talked about them not having Brew McCoy. That was a big thing for what led Texas A&M to be very involved in the game against Alabama was their receiving core. They had a lot of yards after catch, and that's what Tennessee probably liked to do with Brew McCoy is attack him and have him as your main receiving target, similar to how Texas A&M attacked their plethora of receivers there. They don't have that, so that tells me you got to run the ball to beat Bama. If you're Tennessee, you've been a team that's been priding themselves on running the ball. You've been great on running the ball all year. You just ran for over 200 yards against Texas A&M. What's stopping you from doing that against Bama? I think they're going to be able to do it. I do. Jabari Small and Wright and Jalen Wright are like if we talked about Penn State having a good backfield, I think that this is one of the most underrated backfields in all of college football this year. I think this might be a top 3 backfield in all of college football this year. It might even be top 2, to be completely honest. I think there's an argument that can be made there. But, I love this run game. I think that they are going to be able to run the ball against Bama. But I agree with what Tyler said where he's just kind of like, Bama's better. Both these defenses are good too. Tennessee's defensive front has been amazing this year. Obviously, they got a lot of pressure on Max Johnson last week, and we know what Alabama's offensive line in this game is. But the same thing happened against Texas A&M where Alabama had X amount of penalties and, Milroe was sacked, what was it? He was 6 times in the ball game, I believe. And they still won the game. And I think that Alabama's just going to be able to do the same thing to Tennessee that they've done to Ole Miss and they've done to Texas A&M, and that's just grind that football game to a point where it has to be theirs. It has to be their game to win. And I think that they're going to do the same thing to Tennessee. I got this game right in the middle. Probably a little bit more closer to Tyler's side. I believe we're only differing by 4 total points there, but I got Alabama in this game. I think that it's going to be the same thing that we've seen from them this year in those close games. I think they're going to be able to do it. They're going to be able to take the advantage. They're going to be able to really, really, really put themselves in the driver's seat in the West, and we're going to see that. I got Bama 24-16 over Tennessee in this one this week. Give me the tie to get back on top in the third Saturday of October. And now we're going to do a 180 and talk about 2 teams that are right now on the cliff. And by the cliff, I mean the cliff before the fall off. 2 teams that are currently right now sitting with 2 losses. I believe they're both 4-2 in the season. Both of them are unranked by AP poll standards. Tyler and I both have them in our top 25s. And that's Clemson and Miami. Clemson's favored by 3 on the road. Miami's hosting them. Not really much of a road environment, but still road. Miami, obviously, they looked pretty solid in the first half against North Carolina, but North Carolina's offensive talent showed in the second half. Clemson's a little bit, I'm not even going to say a little bit, Clemson's a very different football team than what North Carolina is offensively, but I think that this is a very interesting matchup this week. One of these teams is going to have their 3rd loss in the season in this game, and they're probably going to go off the rails in this game, but I'll ask you first, Tyler, which team do you think is going to be able to, pull this game out?
So this game is going to be massive for both the head coaches. Mario Cristobal obviously not looking very good. Last week, they honestly did not play a bad game. They just, the same issue. It's turnovers. Turnovers have plagued this team constantly. They played a very good North Carolina team last week. They were up at halftime. The week before, they should have won, and they didn't. And that was a costly mistake, and Mario Cristobal owned up to that. And I think with Clemson, you hear Dabo. He's still making quotes, letting people know that people are getting in his head, and most noticeably just talking about how they've built their team up, and he's still buying on the ideology that that's how you win football games, and it's going to turn around at some point. And obviously, Clemson has turned around. They lost a very competitive game against Florida State, where they probably looked like the better team, and they've been good ever since. Obviously, the Wake Forest game was ugly, but they were up for most part of that game. Just the offense could not get going. But when I look at this game, it's going to be the Miami run game. Can they run on this Clemson front? The Clemson front has been pretty solid against the rush. And Miami, obviously, we know they want to pass the ball, but they also have the ability to pass the ball at a very high level. We seen it against Texas A&M. We saw it last week against North Carolina. They threw the ball, pretty well. Once again, turnovers. It's plagued them. And coming back at home, Miami, are they going to be able to clean up? Are they just going to be able to play a clean game? They don't even have to play the best game. They just need to limit, even half their turnovers would probably help so much. This team is still young. Clemson, very experienced team, especially defensively. Are they going to be able to? Are they just going to be able to overwhelm these young athletes that Miami has? I don't think so. I think Miami's going to come in. I think they know last week they played a really good game. I just think they played sloppy. And with Clemson, I think that they've been playing good football. They really have been. They're doing a lot better than what I expected them. I figured they would have one or two more losses at this point of the season. But Miami, I think they're playing really good football, especially last week, and I think it was just unfortunate that they ran into a really, really good North Carolina team. And with that being said, I'm going to pick Miami to win this football game, and I think that they're going to be able to win pretty handedly. I have them covering. Obviously, they're underdogs, 3 points at home, but 28-19. I think they're going to win this game, and I think they're going to win it convincingly. I think Mario Cristobal is going to slow down the talk around him happening right now, and give me the Hurricanes.
So you're going with Miami in this ball game. Before the show, I will little behind the scenes here. Tyler, I had to really kind of reel in my reaction to that because Tyler didn't let Blake or I know who he was picking with this game. He said he was leaning one way, and he said that he thought I would know. And I thought he was going to go with Clemson in this one. And no, he didn't. He went with Miami. But Blake, I'll switch it over to you now.
Yeah, a surprise on this end as well, certainly. I thought he was going to go another way. But I'm going to spoil it here early on. I'm going to tell you I'm going to go the same way that Tyler did in this game. When I look at this Clemson's been a much better team than I expected as well. I thought this team was going to struggle pretty mightily coming into the season. They have played better. Their offense has looked solid when it's needed to. Their defense was the concern for me coming into the year. I will not lie to you. They were replacing a lot, especially up front. And they have, for the most part, not necessarily – they have exceeded my expectations, certainly. They're not the Clemson of old by any means, but they have exceeded my expectations, and it's kept them in some football games for sure. But Miami is a very good team. I will stand by. I think Miami is an underrated team. I think people have seen them take 2 losses, one in just ridiculous fashion to Georgia Tech, obviously, as has been talked about nonstop, and the one last week to a UNC team where, as Tyler said and as Kate has said as well, it's a good team. The UNC team has looked great. They're, I think, at this point, probably undisputable top 10, at least amongst the three of us. They look exceptional. And Miami, yeah, they've been turnover prone. They've been sloppy. They're young. All of these things are true, but these are also a lot of things that can kind of, other than the young part, you can't change how young you are on a week-to-week basis other than the fact that, you're going to age a week in that time span. But you can change how sloppy you are on a week-to-week basis, realistically. It's going to be about, can that team clean up? And at some point, they're going to have to. Going into this game, I think they will. Frankly, I think Miami, as long as they don't turn the football over, they are going to outmatch this Clemson team pretty heavily. I really like what I've seen of this Miami team all year long. They have developed well with that youth. That offensive line, especially from last year, has taken a massive step up. But even throughout the year, obviously starting some freshmen up there, they have taken a step forward every week. it's a favorable matchup as well because, like I said, although that defensive front for Clemson has exceeded my expectations, I don't see them matching up well with the Miami offensive line. I think Miami's going to run the ball really well here. If they can't, they're going to throw it. It's the truth of the matter, as Tyler was saying. They can do it however they need to. I don't think this game's going to be particularly close. Realistically, it's not a hostile road environment, as we've said, down in Coral Gables, but it's a long trip at the very minimum for Clemson to make. And I think they're outmatched. I think they're going to be outcoached here realistically. And I think Dabo may have some talk around it. I don't know. There's certainly doubts, and there's certainly people that are highly critical of him. We'll see how the talk is after this game, if this comes to fruition. But I got Miami 24-13 here, and I don't think it's going to feel like much of a ball game when you watch it.
Yeah. I will say before I recorded this, I didn't think I was going to be the only one picking the team that I'm picking. A little spoiler there, but I guess I am one in myself here with this pick. Obviously, you guys bring up good points. Here's the thing. I think Miami's better. I'll say this. I think Miami is a better football team than Clemson. I think they are. When you put them on paper, I think Miami's a better football team than Clemson. I just think Miami is about to fall off. The same way that we've seen them countless times and countless years. I think it's time. Georgia Tech, obviously, that situation happened. They should not have lost that football game. Last week, they were ahead on North Carolina for a majority of that first half, and then North Carolina just came out swinging in the second half. There's no other way around it. They did. I think that I think that Miami is a better football team than Clemson. I do. I think that they are a better football team than Clemson, but I think this is a very big circumstantial situation. This could also be a situation where Miami is in wounded animal mode. That we could see that because they're sitting there and they're saying, well, this is it. This is make or break for our season. If we lose this game, it's over. It's very similar to what Texas A&M faced last weekend against Tennessee. And I picked against Texas A&M last weekend. I understand that that's the road game, but this isn't really a home playing in whatever a Hard Rock Stadium. I guess that's the name of whatever the heck it is now. It's been changed 97 times, but playing there isn't really a home environment for Miami. It really hasn't been in its history, besides really that one game against Notre Dame in like 2017, 2018. Anyways, I think that this is Miami. This is it. This is the tipping point in this team. I understand that Clemson, they didn't look too good in their last game against Wake Forest. It was, but they're coming off of a bye. They are coming off of a bye here, and they've had an extra week to prepare for this team. They've seen this team. They've been able to study this team a little bit more. And, I don't think Clemson's in a good position right now when it comes to – I don't think either of these teams, when it comes to program stability, I don't think either of them are really in a good position right now. I think, honestly, Miami's in a better position because I still think Mario Cristobal is a solid coach. It's just a couple decisions haven't worked out his way. And he also has not won a home ACC game during his tenure at Miami. That's concerning. That's a big concern there. But Clemson, Dabo Swinney is off in la-la land, in my opinion, right now. I don't know where Dabo Swinney's head is to where he thinks he can contend on a national level with the way that he is running his football program. Because newsflash, adapt or die. And I don't want to say that they're dying because they're still good on a conference level, but they're not good on a national level. Clemson is not at the point where they're going to be, since really they've got, Lawrence has moved on, they haven't been at a point where they can contend for a national title. I don't think at any point. Yeah, they were in, until the last game of the regular season last year in the college football playoff talks, and if they had beat South Carolina, they probably would have got in, but they would have been in the same situation that TCU would have been in. If Clemson would have played that Georgia team, that game would have been ugly last year. Very ugly. And I don't think that they're at the point where they're going to be able to contend. So it's two teams right now that are sitting there. A lot more is at stake than just a loss this weekend and a loss of possibly a season going downhill. This could be like careers I don't know about careers, but like careers at schools going downhill here for this weekend because of the expectations that are put on the ball coach at Miami and what Dabo Swinney has been saying out of his mouth that's making a little bit of gibberish sense. This is a big game this weekend, and since Clemson's coming off of a bye, and because of the way that the trends are going, I think Miami, like I said, Miami's a better team on paper. I just think that they're at that point where if I sit there and I say which team do I think is actually going to collapse first, I think that Miami is going to collapse first. And that's what I'd take out of it. I'd take a lot of, I think that this game is going to be a tight game. I have this game very close. I really think it could go either way. But I just think that Clemson's going to be in a position where, they've taken care of Miami. Miami hasn't beat them, I believe, since the 1950s. It's been a minute, to say the least. But I don't know. All the trends. I know trends aren't always a thing, and trends are meant to be broken. But all the trends are pointing Clemson in this game, and that's where I lean. I lean Clemson in this game. I just think with the extra week, the defense has looked very good, over the past couple of weeks since that Florida State game. They've been good there. They're still struggling offensively, but I think they're going to do enough in this game. I got this game 30-28. I think that Clemson wins this one. Very interesting ball game there, but let's move on to another ACC matchup. This one toward really the top of the ACC standings. When you look at it, it's Duke and it's Florida State. Both of these teams currently undefeated in conference. As it stands right now, Duke's only loss this season is to Notre Dame at home. They are, Riley Leonard's been hurt, and it's very much rumored that he, won't. He's probably a game-time decision this game, but I would lean toward the sense that he will not be active in this game. But Florida State 14.5. Do we think that's a little bit too much this weekend, Tyler?
So Duke, this is, if you're a casual fan, you don't watch much college football, you're gonna see like Duke. How are they ranked? Duke is not, obviously they've never been a historically great football program, but this is a Duke team that's not going to be outshined by the moment. They're going to be ready for this game. They're going to be ready to go down to Florida. They're going to play a really good Florida State team. But when we're talking about Florida State, they are ranked number 4 in the AP poll, but they have not looked the sharpest, I should say. They've looked good. The Syracuse win was very impressive to me, at least. But I think this is a Florida State team that has shown that they're not going to be the sharpest every week, and it kind of seems like it's a week-by-week basis. Where they have looked good is at home, though. They've looked really, really good at home. Their weakness points have been on the road. And when we're talking about this game, I think Florida State, obviously they should be covered. Not covered, but they should be a very heavy favorite, I should say, especially without Riley Leonard playing in this game, which it sounds like is going to be the case. But I think Duke, this offensive line, I think they're going to be ready for this pass rush. I think obviously the pass rush is going to be still going to get in there. When you have the likes of Jared Verse on the defensive line, one of the best edges in the country, he's gonna have his numbers, and he's gonna be able to open up the field for other defensive players to get in the backfield. But when we're talking about Duke, they're going to be able to run the ball. They're going to chew the clock. Florida State is not going to have the ball. I don't think as much as people think. I think people are going to see Florida State being able to pass the ball on Duke very well. I don't think so. I think Duke, their secondary, I think they're going to be fine. And I think their pass rush is going to be good enough to get into the backfield to pressure Jordan Travis, whether he has turnovers or he beats that pressure and makes some big plays with his legs. Who knows? This game is going to be... I think this game is going to be a lot closer than what people think. I'm going to have Duke covering, but with that being said, I do think Florida State wins this game. I think Riley Leonard being out is just, I think it's going to be too much for the Blue Devils to overcome. But Florida State, I have them winning by 7, 24-17. I think this game was going to be, I don't want to say boring, but I don't think it's going to be a fireworks show. I think it's going to be a defensive game for Duke, and I think Mike Elko, even in a loss, I think this is going to be. I think this is going to be a really good game for him to show, other athletic directors of why he should be getting looks at, some of the best programs in the country.
Yeah, you bring up some good points there, especially with Riley Leonard being out in this game. Blake, I'll turn it over to you now on this ball game. You were a little torn on this game when you were talking, but I don't think your final score really shows that.
It certainly doesn't. Going into this game and trying to figure out where I was going to go with it, it's a great matchup here on paper. I really think it is. Duke's looked great all year. They've looked really sound. When you watch them play, they're a sound team. Mike Elko, that's just kind of the coach he is. He doesn't have the athletes at Duke that he would have at a lot of these upper end programs. So what does he do? He coaches them up. He coaches them up well. This is a sound football team all the way through. They don't make a lot of mistakes. They will beat you because they are more physical. They will beat you because they are just more disciplined. They will beat you because they want it more, because they are going to come take it from you. Problem is, Florida State and Mike Norvell have a talent gap here that's pretty severe. Duke was able to do this against Clemson at the beginning of the year because Clemson just doesn't have the talent that they need in certain positions and the athletes that they need in certain positions. Florida State does. Riley Leonard being out in this game hurts a lot. Obviously, it's still questionable, as we've all said, but I would be frankly astonished from everything that I've heard amongst the Duke folk if he actually steps on the field in more than a walking boot on the sideline. But so it's really unfortunate that we're not going to see him play in this game. Would it be a different outcome? Maybe. Not having your starting quarterback is always going to be a pretty big issue. Does he swing this pendulum enough where I say that, spoiler alert here, I'm taking FSU in this game. Does he swing the pendulum enough to say, Duke wins this game with him on the field? It's hard to say. It doesn't matter at the end of the day because we're not going to have the chance to find out. What matters is Henry Bolen going to win this game for Duke? And I can't see it happening. Duke is going to want to run the ball. They've been great at running the ball all year. Florida State's got a great defensive front, though. They've been iffy at times, but the talent is all there. I really believe in this Florida State line defensive front to show up at some point and when it matters most here. I haven't been as high on this Florida State team as a lot of the national folk have been. I don't think any three of us have been, for the last several weeks. I think we've all been a little lower than they have been nationally, but it's a good team that Mike Norvell's got at Florida State. They've got athletes outside offensively that, as well coached as the Duke secondary is and as well schemed as it is, I don't think that they're going to be able to contend with them. And if this game ever sniffs, getting out of hand at all, it's going to be a runaway. And that's kind of why my final score looks the way it does here. I'll tell you, I have it at 34-13 Florida State here, and that's because, like I said, if Florida State ever sniffs, a 2-possession lead or anything of the sorts, it's going to be a runaway. I think it'll feel close early. It might be, a really good game up until the half, but I think we're going to hit a freeze point or a breaking point at some point here, and Florida State's just going to gap them at the end. So I'm taking Florida State here. I'm taking them pretty heavy to cover, obviously, here. And, so I'm taking the Noles.
Yeah, you bring up some good points there, Blake, of how this game could be close for a half. I agree with you here. I think, spoiler alert here, we're all three the same in this one with who we're picking. Florida State, I think I agree with Blake here. I don't think either three of us are as high on this team as the national media has been this year because we look at a lot of teams. A lot of people still think that Florida State is a clear runaway in the ACC, and they're clearly going to make the playoff this year. I don't think that's the case. I don't think any three of us think that's the case. I think Tyler and I actually in our top 25s, we both had North Carolina ahead of Florida State this week. But Florida State gets a test against Duke. We get to see them once again in a solid test. It's at home in this one, but I agree with the sense that I just think Duke not having Riley Leonard is a lot in this game because I think he keeps this game competitive for 4 quarters. I don't know if they'd win it with Riley Leonard, but I think that he would keep this game competitive for 4 quarters if he's there. When I see this game being competitive for either 2.5 or 3, I think Duke hangs around in this game. I do. I think that they're like Blake and Tyler both said, I think that they're just well coached enough and that defense is good enough to hang around with Florida State. But I just think that Florida State is going to really kind of get it to a point where they're just that breaking point that Blake said, where they're just going to have a play or something's going to go their way and they're going to be able to take over. They're at home, good environment there in Tallahassee. So, I got the Noles in this one. I just think that the circumstances of this game favor Florida State. I don't think that they're going to cover in this game. I think Duke does cover in this one. I got a 31-19. Florida State, give me the Noles in this one. I think it's competitive. Like I said, 2.5, 3 quarters competitive game, and then we hit that one moment, that breaking point, as Blake said, and that really turns the tide of the game. But Now to a very, very interesting game in the Big 12 this weekend. I know the three of us last weekend on Thursday watched the majority of the second half of the West Virginia and Houston game. And we all kind of sat there and were in a bit of shock to the ending of that ball game. But West Virginia is looking to bounce back this week at home. They host Oklahoma State, a team that's kind of got things together in the past couple weeks. They beat Kansas last weekend, which was a little bit of a shock to me in that game, but they're looking like that they've kind of pieced some things together after a very, very rocky start to the season. But they beat the two Kansas schools back-to-back weeks, upsets for them at home, but now they hit a road game and they have to travel to Morgantown. Tyler, I'll ask you first. How are you thinking about this game?
So for West Virginia, obviously, losing on a Hail Mary, it's probably one of the worst ways you could lose, but you can never kind of predict those things. Those are just it's an unfortunate thing. But I think West Virginia, I think they knew that I don't know if they were the better team than Houston, but I mean, for the first half, they outplayed them, and I don't know if Houston outplayed them enough in the second half to really, solidify that they were the better team. I think it was a very even matched up game, and when we're talking about Oklahoma State, obviously the last two games they played have been very good games at home against the Kansas schools. But now they're going on the road, and Morgantown is a very underrated environment in the country. And I think West Virginia, for them, they're going to want to rely on the run game. C.J. Donaldson with that offensive line he's been very good. CJ is a very good running back, and I think if I'm not going to say he will transfer because I know he loves the situation in West Virginia. I think a lot of people were shocked when he did commit there, but if he were to transfer out, I think he'd get a lot of interest from some big programs. But I think the biggest part of this game is who offensively is going to be able to get to those third and shorts in order to run the ball. Because obviously, I don't think Oklahoma State, they want to. It's a Mike Gundy team, but I don't think they want to run the ball or pass the ball too much because they really can't. They can't pass the ball at a very high level. They're starting to figure some things out, but I still think they're at a point to where they don't want to rely on it. Especially on third and long. So I think the key to this game is third and short. Who can get there first? And I think West Virginia has the better defense, and West Virginia on first percentage downs on first and second. They are 17th in the country defensively. So. I think West Virginia, they'll be able to win this game. I think they'll be able to win it handily. I think they have the recipe. I think they're coming off a bad loss. Oklahoma State is coming off a really good 2-week stretch, and West Virginia gets to come home. Oklahoma State has to go on the road finally, and I think West Virginia is gonna be able to pull it off. I have this game 27-14.
So you're thinking this one's gonna be a little bit lower scoring. I think Blake kind of teetered between this game either being a shootout or low scoring, but I'll turn it over to you now, Blake. What are you thinking?
Yeah, so Kate, I think when you were talking about last week for WVU and the way we were watching that night, I think you were looking for the word heartbroken is how we all felt a little bit watching that one for the Mountaineers. That one was a tough moment, especially for those of us that have really trusted this WVU team this year. I know Tyler and I were really high on them. I think Kate, you were fairly high on them as well. I know I stood by Neil Brown last year when people kind of were calling for his job. I thought he was worth at least one more year to see how it would go, and it's really worked out. They could easily be a 5-1 team right now, if not for a Hail Mary, which is just a horrible way to lose a game. But they're coming back home, as Tyler said. Morgantown's a really good environment. It's going to be an afternoon kick here. Morgantown's going to be ready to go for this game, especially for an Oklahoma State team that's coming off back-to-back wins. The record looks better than I think that team is. Truthfully, the Oklahoma State, I still have some pretty big concerns about. It's a team that can't particularly throw the football to the level they need to with that quarterback room, and really with the guys outside. The receiver room it's lacking, at least in what we've seen of Oklahoma State receiver rooms in the past under Gundy, especially in you got to go back a couple of years, obviously, but to some really good guys there. Their offense is a struggle. They can run the ball to a good enough level to win some of these games. I don't know if they're going to do it to be able to beat WVU here, though. This WVU team, I still think really solid. I think they are a top 5 team in the Big 12. As crazy as it is to say at this point, if you told someone that last year, or even after week 1 or 2 this year, I think they'd look at you like you had 4 heads and you were going insane. But I really do think this is a top 5 team in the Big 12, if not maybe even top 4. It's close. WVU can their offense can do what it needs to do here. It's going to be the thing. It's going to be the question. Can they? And I think they can absolutely. Oklahoma State, they've been solid defensively. That's kind of been the key to them winning some of these games. Can they match up against the WVU offense? I just don't think they're going to be able to do it enough to a level where, or at least to enough of a level that their offense can match it. I don't think their offense is going to match WVU in this one, simply put. It's not going to be a super high-scoring affair. I honestly don't think it's going to be a close game at the end of the day, though. I think WVU is really going to take a hold of this one. Wounded animal mode, we talk about it a lot. We mention it a lot. It's going to be big here. WVU is going to come out, I think, take this one 33-19 here back at home in Morgantown over Gundy and the Cowboys.
So I think I've got this game the closest. I do have this game the closest. I think that this is going to be a very competitive game. I will say I do have West Virginia covering. Spoiler alert. But I think that, as Tyler said, the last 2 weeks for Oklahoma State, the reason why they've not really the reason, but a reason why they've been able to pull off those upsets against the Kansas schools, they're at home. I mean, they were in Stillwater. They've really, when you look at it overall this year for Oklahoma State this year, most of their struggles, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, have been on the road. Iowa State, they lost that game on the road, and then the Arizona State game was that game was an interesting game overall if you paid attention to the weather in that game, and then they got absolutely curb stomped by South Alabama at home. This team, they've kind of found a little bit of it, but I don't think that they've found enough of it. I think that West Virginia is going to play, a little on edge this game, for a sense that, they feel like they should have won that Houston game. They're heartbroken after that loss, and I think that they are going to prove that, hey, we're still as Blake said, we're still a pretty good team in the Pac-12, or Big 12, excuse me. And I think that we're gonna see this Sunday. I've got it close just because I think that this is a interesting matchup of two teams. One of them's hot right now, and the other one's coming off of a loss. But I think that West Virginia is going to be able to have a little something in this ballgame, a little push ahead that's going to put them ahead for a majority of the ballgame, but the scoreboard's going to look closer than this game really is. I've got West Virginia in this one, 31-27, closer than you two, but I still have them up there at a certain point. I think the Mountaineers bounce back. I think they get a good win this weekend. I mistakenly said they were in the Pac-12. They're in the Big 12, but now I will talk about the Pac-12, and I will talk about the only really Pac-12 game that we're going to talk about this weekend, and that is Utah and USC. Utah coming off of, I believe they're coming off of their bye this weekend. They're coming off of the Cal game, correction. They're coming off of a game against Cal that was pretty close for I believe a half, maybe a little bit more than a half, but they ended up pulling out against Cal, a little underrated Cal team. And then you got USC, who absolutely got demolished last weekend by Notre Dame. Tyler and I gave our thoughts about USC after that game, and I think this is a very interesting game this weekend. Tyler, I'll turn it over to you. How are you feeling about this game this weekend?
So, obviously, USC, I think a lot of people are going to pick USC to win this game, and my biggest thing is, are they going to be mentally tough to rebound after a shellacking in South Bend? And that's my biggest question. Obviously, I'm not going to trust this defense under Lincoln Riley, not because Lincoln Riley can't, he has the defensive talent. Obviously, it's not the best team, based off talent on the defense, but there's been one problem, and it's his defensive coordinator and his ability to notice the issue with his program, and it's going to follow him until he gets rid of a defensive coordinator, which I'm not even going to say the name of because he doesn't deserve to have his name be said on the show. This team, I have worries. Utah, obviously, we're thinking, like, how in the world are they going to be able to do anything offensively? Notre Dame didn't have to. They didn't have to, and obviously that came off the turnovers that USC had, but we're talking about a Utah defense that has been unreal. this year. One of the best defenses in the country, and I just my issue with USC is that if they're not going to want to run the ball, they're going to pass the ball on what has been one of the best pass defenses in the country, second in defensive success rate. USC they better be ready to play defense because what happens if we go to USC, which maybe they don't have turnovers, but what happens if they do punt the ball 3 or 4 times in the first half? We're going to see USC defense on the field, which against Notre Dame they didn't look bad, but they did let up big plays through the air in the second half. When they were down, what happens if Utah gets out to a 7-0 early lead? What happens if Utah scores in the first possession, runs the ball down USC's throat, and USC just has no answer? It's going to come down to mental toughness, and I think USC does not have this. I don't think they're a mentally tough team, and I think what we're about to see is a USC team. You were talking about it with Miami. I think USC is going to have a questionable game here, and I know it's at home. Whatever that means. It is a home game, but USC and their home fields aren't typically the greatest, and this is going to be a big game, and it's going to be a nationally broadcast game, and my gut just says I think Utah is going to win this game. I think Utah is going to be able to control the ball. I don't think they're going to blow them out, but I think we're going to see a USC team that may be down 2 touchdowns going into the fourth quarter, or maybe down a touchdown, and they just cannot get there. I think USC has more past the victory just based off talent and the fact that Utah is going to have to roll with either Bryson Barnes or Nate Johnson. My guess would be Nate Johnson, but who knows? I don't think Cam Rising is, I don't even know if he's going to be playing this year. We're at week 8, and, who knows when he's going to be back. And by the time he comes back, obviously they can still play for a bowl game, but they might be out of Pac-12 contention at that point. Who knows? This Utah team I love their defense, and I think they're going to be able to get Caleb Williams into some trouble. I think this Utah defense is going to be able to carry him, and I think they're going to win. I think it's going to be close. I'm not going to say they're going to blow them out. I have it 28-24. I don't think Utah is going to score that many points offensively, but I think their defense is going to help them out for sure. But give me the Utes. I'm not going to pick USC until I see them rebound. That's my biggest thing. Is I don't want to pick a team that I don't think is mentally tough to win a football game, especially when we're getting to the later part of October, heading into November. Give me the Utah Utes, man.
Yeah, you bring up some good points about this game and mental toughness in this game for USC. Blake, I know you're very torn on this game. You think this game can go either way. Which way are you thinking it's going right now at this moment?
Yeah, so Tyler's bringing up a lot of great points here, and I could easily see that coming to fruition. Tell you the truth, I was kind of siding with Tyler right before we started recording, actually. I was up and through the whole week. I was really on the Utah train here, number one, because of the mental toughness of the USC program, or of the USC team right now. It may not be there. This is very true, but my bigger concern was their physical toughness. They got bodied just all over the field by Notre Dame. Something I kind of expected to happen, not to the extent that it did, though. Obviously, the Caleb Williams turnovers did not make that game, look very good. But even outside of that, they really got dominated all over the field. It was not a close football game, turnovers or not. So the physical toughness of this team has been called into question all year. I said it after the Arizona game as well, or I said it about the Arizona game as well, that they got dominated by Arizona. They are not a physical team at all, and they're going against one of the most physical teams in the country and one of the most physical programs of the last, 15 years in Utah. Kyle Whittingham's got that team rolling as always. So I was with Utah up until up until we hit record, when Cade and I were talking, and I kind of had a little bit of a swing here. USC's coming back home. Obviously, yes, they got absolutely just destroyed. Tyler used one of my favorite words there. They got shellacked by Notre Dame. It's a tough moment for USC. You can't predict turnovers here, but I don't know that you're going to have to. As concerned as I am about USC up front, their ability to protect Caleb's going to be a problem, and his ability under pressure is going to be a problem, because he was not good under pressure last week. He was not good under pressure the week prior. He's been bad under pressure all year. I believe he is ranked something in the 120s, 115s maybe, or one teens maybe about with QB rating when under pressure. He's been bad. There's no doubt about it. But he's been under pressure all year as well. That offensive line has struggled greatly, and they're going to struggle again against this Utah team. That being said, though, Utah doesn't have the horses in this game. I don't think, just in any sense of the word. Their offense concerns me a lot. They're a team that I think is also waiting to be kind of exposed. I'm not high on this Utah team. I really haven't been. After week one, I kind of had concerns about it, and the later we got into the season, it's kind of just grown. They beat that UCLA team in a close matchup. It was an ugly matchup. They got really handled by Oregon State. I know that game looked close, but it just wasn't. It never felt close, at least to me. Felt like Oregon State always had that game in hand. Uh, I just don't think this Utah team is all it's cracked up to be. Personally, I think USC is going to come in here with something to prove, and I think they're going to, at least for a week, prove it to some people. To me, I don't think a win here, unless they look vastly different, it's not going to be as impressive as I think it would be to most. But I do think they're going to come out here and they're going to get a win. I have it 35-18. I think they may not be more physical, but they're more athletic. And even though this USC defense also has struggled, I just don't see a way this Utah offense finds a strong footing against the athletes that USC has out here. So I'm going to go with USC, and I'm going to go with them in a fairly sizable win here.
Yeah, you bring up a lot of good points. Both of you guys really bring up a lot of good points. I know, Blake, you said we were talking about this game right before we started recording, and I think it's because of what I was saying about this game that might have swung you. A little spoiler alert there, but I see both arguments of this game. I do. I think that honestly, Utah for USC might be an even worse matchup than Notre Dame. Seriously, because I think I think their defense is better than Notre Dame's is. I think they have an ability to force turnovers more than Notre Dame does. I think that Utah, when I looked at this, honestly, this game this week was probably, besides the last game that we talked about, was probably the game I swung the most on. I felt pretty confident in most of my other ones. Maybe Clemson-Miami was a little one I was questionable on, but this is the one that I think was the most questionable, besides probably the last one that we'll talk about. But, I sit here and I look at Utah and I say, all right, it basically looks like Cam Rising is not going to set foot on the field for maybe the entire season, which is a big issue for them because if they have him, this is I think totally different about this game. Not just in the fact that he's healthy, he's playing. No. He's healthy and he's been playing for at least 2-3 weeks. I thought he was going to be healthy, ready to go by now. Has not happened. So they've had to go to the backups. Bryson Barnes and Nate Johnson, neither of them have impressed me one bit this year. They've got the job done when they need to get the job done, but they've also cost them in that, like you said, that Oregon State game. They weren't able to do anything against Oregon State. Oregon State has a lot better defense than USC does. I will give them that. Yes, that is a fact. That's not an opinion. That's a fact. But I think that this game is just so interesting to me because of the spot where it's at. Because Caleb Williams right now is being a part of me also wants to swing what I'm thinking about this game because a lot of people are starting to see a little something in Caleb Williams, this little word called arrogance in this kid. And yes, I called him a kid, even though we're about the same age. He, when you look at Caleb Williams thinks he's the best thing in college football. And to an extent, yeah, he probably is. He probably is the best, one of the best college football players of all time. He is. But I think it's getting to his head a little bit. And it's shown this year a lot because the things that we talked about for USC this year is, they got to figure, they'll be fine. We kind of saw the Arizona State game like, okay, they struggled for a half, but they bounced back. And then we saw the Colorado game. We were like, okay, they let Colorado come right back into that game with explosive plays. And then we saw the Arizona game, and we all thought, yeah, Arizona probably, should have pulled that game out. And that's what led me to them being upset by Notre Dame. I picked that game right. And that game didn't go the way I thought it was going to be. I thought USC was a better team than Notre Dame was. And, you know, they got the talent on the outside. USC in this game's got the talent, but Utah's been that, thorn in their side. This is a revenge game for USC, too. None of us have talked about that yet. This is a revenge game. Utah beat them twice, knocked them out of the college football playoff. Granted, Georgia probably would have done the same, but knocked them out of the college football playoff. And, here we are. This is a revenge game for USC. They're favored by a touchdown, which I think that's a good line because, if this game goes Utah's way, and I mean, all Utah's got to do is do what Notre Dame did. Get up by a score. Game is over early. I'm talking like within the first 5 minutes of the game. If Utah scores a touchdown and USC has no points on the board, Utah's winning the game. Period. Because USC, as Tyler said, they have been struggling against against playing a physical team. They have not bounced back. They have not been able to show that toughness yet this year, and they haven't done well when facing adversity. That's a big thing in this game. I think that USC, though, when you look at my rankings and what I believe I had Utah at 14, and I had USC at 16. Very close teams. I think that USC, like I said, I think that this might even be a worse matchup for USC than Notre Dame. But the thing is that, all Caleb Williams has to do is play. He didn't even have to play a clean game. He just got to limit the turnovers to, 1 or 2. If he does that, it's the same. It's a competitive game. I mean, look at the past two times that USC has faced Utah. What's been the difference in the game? Really a turnover or two from Caleb Williams, and they haven't been able to grind it out because of Utah's offense. Utah doesn't have that offense this year. Granted, I understand, it's USC's defense. That defensive unit is not very good. But Notre Dame didn't do much, and I think Utah has, I think Utah, honestly, on offense is not as good as Notre Dame is at this point of the season. I don't think that they are. And Notre Dame is not a great offense. They got one receiver, and he's a tight end, and they run it between the tackles with Estime. That's their offensive game plan, period. Simple as that. And I still think that they are a better offense than Utah is at this point. I swing a lot on this game. I think if this game, if it's, if we get into a game where this is a slugfest, Utah's winning. If Utah forces more than 2 turnovers in this game, Utah's winning. If Utah goes up early in this game, Utah's winning. All I got to say about this game. I think Utah has more paths to victory in this game. I do. But with that being said, I'm taking USC because I just think they're in a bounce-back situation. They got to understand. I understand that arrogance, the word I used, might be in the head of Caleb Williams right now. He might be inflating his ego a little too much, but he's still a good football player. And he's that offense. He's that team. Not even that offense. I'm going to say he's that team, period, team. And I hope that he sits there and realizes, all right, we're facing adversity. I understand I haven't been the best the past couple weeks. I'm going to turn it on here against Utah. We got a home game. We're going to show out in front of our crowd, and we're going to sit here and say, you know what? Our name's still floating around in the Pac-12. We're still undefeated in Pac-12 play. We're still looking ahead and saying, maybe we can contend with the Oregons and the Washingtons and the Oregon States of the world. I think that's what clicks here this weekend. That's a gut feeling, and sometimes it's said to trust your gut. I've gone against my gut a lot of times in my life, and it's come back to bite me. And my gut right now says USC is going to turn it around because the talent's going to do it. And I think the talent will. And by the talent, I mean Mr. Caleb Williams. I think USC shows out in this ballgame. I think it's going to be the other way around. I think they're going to get out to an early lead, and that's going to bury Utah. Just because I don't think Utah has the firepower on offense to compete with USC. And if they turn it into a game where it's offense, USC's winning this game. And I think that's what's going to happen in this game. I think they're going to bounce back. They're back in front of the home crowd. I think Caleb Williams is going to have a great game. I'm going to go USC in this one. I'm going big in this one. USC big to cover. 45-20. Give me USC in this one. I get that's a big difference in a score, but I feel like that's how this game's going to play out. I could see it being like 21-13 Utah. Could be that game too. I don't know. I just think that USC is going to bounce back because they have the best player in college football. Simple as that. But, yeah, that really wraps up that game. And now we've got one more game to talk about. This one's a little interesting. Ole Miss and Auburn. Ole Miss is coming off of a bye this week. I believe Auburn is... Are they coming off? I believe Auburn also is coming off of a bye this week, if I'm not mistaken. It's the Stripe game in Jordan-Hare this weekend. Interesting position. Some, back in some days might have called this one a trap game. I'm putting quotes. You can't see it, but I'm putting quotes around that. It's an interesting matchup, Auburn and Ole Miss. I'll ask you first, Tyler. How are we thinking about this game?
So, you said Auburn was coming off a bye week. We picked their game last week.
No, it was the LSU game.
LSU.
Excuse me.
Wanted to clarify
that game was so out of my mind that I did not remember that game because it was so uncompetitive.
Yeah.
My mistake.
It's understandable. Just wanted to clarify that for people who are listening. They were not on a bye week. They did get just pounded by LSU. But when we talk about this game, LSU obviously having one of the best offenses in the country, they showcased that on a pretty big scale, 48 to, I believe, 18 was the final score.
48.
Off the top of my head. But when I look at this game, when I look at the offensive talent that LSU has, I don't think the talent for Ole Miss is going to be all quite there. I think it's going to be, I think it's going to be a good game for Ole Miss. I really do. I think they're going to be able to run the ball. They've been running the ball at a better rate than they have at the start of the season. But when I look at this, Auburn just got absolutely obliterated on the road at LSU in the Tiger Bowl. And now they get to come home. It's going to be a great environment. And when I'm looking at the talent, I think the secondary talent for Auburn might have a good day against this Ole Miss offense. Obviously, Ole Miss, they've been a very better team, I should say, in the last month of play. Really, since the loss they took against Alabama, they've just been they've been a better team than that performance, and I understand that. But I think that this game is going to be a perfect representation of what an atmosphere can do to a team, and I think Auburn being able to come back home, they're gonna get a big jolt. I think that Auburn, obviously, we know the offensive struggles there. They cannot really pass the ball at all. They run the ball at a semi-decent rate. Jarquez Hunter, very good running back. If I had to give a comparison, he is a smaller TreVeyon Henderson, where he just has a ton of burst. He can get outside the tackles. Moves very good. He can make some people miss, but it's really going to come down to, can Ole Miss plug gaps, and can they get pressure on Peyton Thorne or Robbie Ashford? I don't know who it's going to be. I guess it sounded like Robbie Ashford got a lot of QB1 time against LSU at some point in that game, but what's going to happen going into this game, I'm not exactly for sure. But the biggest thing for me is that if Ole Miss cannot pass the ball and Auburn can get Ole Miss into third and longs, making Jackson Dart have to throw the ball. And I think Jackson Dart I think he's a good quarterback. I really do. But I think this Auburn secondary is going to have a good day. I think they have some good NFL players that are going to end up going to the draft this year. And with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and pick the upset. I don't think a lot of people are going to pick this. I have Auburn winning this game. I think coming back to Jordan-Hare after a big loss, I think it's going to be, I think it's going to do a lot for this Tiger team. And with that being said, number 13 Ole Miss is going to fall 24-20 at Jordan-Hare. I'm going to go and take the upset. Probably a risky pick, but you know what? I'm going to go with my gut here.
Yeah, I'm going to say a little something here. I don't know if it's a risky pick. Maybe a little insight there into my pick, but I don't know if it's a risky pick. I'll turn it over to Blake, though, first. Get his thoughts on this game, though.
Yeah, I certainly think it's a risky pick here. I don't know. When I'm looking at this, so Ole Miss coming off that bye, obviously they're going to be well rested here. Auburn coming off of just an absolute splattering all over Tiger Stadium in Baton Rouge. They were outmatched for 4 quarters in a pretty bad way. This Ole Miss offense isn't at the level of LSU. Certainly, there's a little more NFL talent on that LSU team, I think, especially up front. Their offensive line is significantly better than Ole Miss, but Ole Miss isn't shabby by any means. Outside, Ole Miss has some very capable receivers. I'm a big Trey Harris guy. I like what I've seen out of him all year long. what I'm looking at here is a game where once again I think Auburn's just going to be outmatched. I know you guys are liking the stripe game here and Jordan Hare, and you guys kind of asked me where I was feeling about this game, and I pretty immediately snapped off and said I just can't see a way for Auburn. Yes, it's at home. You can call it wounded animal or whatever here. I don't think it can be wounded animal this late in the season for a team that struggled as they have. I like this team coming into the year. I thought they could play a spoiler in a couple of spots. I still think they could down the line. There's one big game that I'm looking at there that they could see, but it's not this weekend. It's just not. I like what I've seen out of Ole Miss so far this year. I like the offense there, and I think the defense has been solid enough. They're a younger defense, adapting to a new system there with Pete Golding. Despite how I may feel about Pete Golding at certain times, he is at least a capable defensive coordinator, which is all it takes to match up this Auburn offense. It's been pretty horrific to watch at times. I think Ole Miss is going to score points here without much difficulty against Auburn. LSU did it pretty easily, and like I said, although LSU's offense is certainly better than Ole Miss's, Ole Miss's is still plenty good. They're going to score well. They're not going to have to fight too hard, I think, to keep Auburn out of the end zone or keep them from driving. Auburn looked pretty rough last week offensively as they had all season. I'm going to take Ole Miss here pretty handily, 41-22. I'm not feeling the upset here by any means. I don't think this game's going to ever look particularly close. I think they're going to jump out early, and I think they're going to take control.
Yeah. I said it's not risky to pick the upset. I don't think it's risky because, like I said, stripe game, Jordan Hare, very hostile environment. Saw it from Georgia. Saw it against Georgia there, a couple weeks ago. I mistakenly just forgot about Auburn last week against LSU because it wasn't much of a game, and we didn't really even hit on it in the recap. That's how little I really even thought about that game. But Auburn just got trounced. As simple as that. They got trounced last weekend by LSU, and I love LSU. I love that LSU team. They're fun to watch. And Ole Miss is a very different football team than that. Ole Miss is a team that personally, they've had Quinshon Judkins, who I personally think coming into this year was my RB. I thought he was going to be the best running back in college football this year. Stand out above the rest. They haven't been able to run the ball the way that I thought they should be able to run the ball this year, like at all. And that's a big concern for me for Ole Miss because the thing is if you look at Auburn and you go back and you take a look at this team. Their last home game. Let's just start with that. Their last home game in Jordan Hare, they took on Georgia. Very interesting game, and Georgia didn't really run the ball very well in that game. And Ole Miss is a team that has struggled to run the ball. And I don't think Jackson Dart's the best quarterback either, simple as that. I don't think he is. I've had a lot of questions about Jackson Dart this year. He's got the job done when he needs to get the job done, but there's been some points that have been a little questionable for him. I think Ole Miss has a ceiling this year, and I think that they've kind of almost already hit their ceiling this year because I don't know how much better this team can get because there isn't going to be drastic improvement from Jackson Dart overnight. Now, they might be able to change the run game up a little bit and get the run game involved, but I think, I don't know if there's much more for this Ole Miss team to go, I don't think there is. That being said, Auburn, they're in the same boat. Auburn has struggled mightily offensively, and as a fan of a Big Ten team and being from Big Ten country, I think I could have told you that a mile away due to their man that's their quarterback, and that's Peyton Thorne. Never thought Peyton Thorne's time at Michigan State. I never thought he was a great quarterback. I saw that he had transferred to Auburn and they had named him a starter, and I sat there and I was like, okay, that's a decision. And it's been the decision that they've ridden with this year. Obviously, they've switched it up a little bit throughout the season and gone with, the 2 QB system, but we'll see what happens. They rolled with Thorne in the Georgia game. It worked out pretty well because he could scramble. This game's going to be different. I think Ole Miss still has a pretty solid front, and Auburn has struggled. Obviously, Jacquez Hunter, I think he's a great running back. I think he is great on the edges, but I sit there and I think this game is going to be close just because I think that this is a tough spot for Ole Miss. I understand they're coming off of a bye, But this is a tough spot for Ole Miss because it's an Auburn home game, and this might be, I don't want to say this is the last hurrah for Auburn, but this could be their last hurrah for about a month. And I think we all know what happens in a month there in Jordan-Hare. But I think that they're going to keep this game competitive. That being said, though, I think Ole Miss is a better football team. I think they are. Simple as that. I think Ole Miss is in a better spot. Like you said, coming off a bye, I think that they're going to struggle in this ball game. It's going to be ugly. It's going to be a tough scrap. But I think that they have just a tad, if you will, if you want to play on words, just a hair more than Auburn does. I have this game very competitive. I was back and forth in this game. I almost picked this game as my upset of the week. I did. I was teetering between this one and the one that I will get to later in our show, but I didn't go with this one for reasons because I think Ole Miss does win. I think it's ugly, as I said. I think it's very close. I have Ole Miss by 1 point. I have it 28-27. Give me the Rebels in this one. I think it's a close ball game. I think this one, like I said, Auburn's going to play a little, charged up in front of their home crowd. It's a striped crowd there. I think it's going to be a competitive ball game. But that wraps up our picks for the week. Now it's time for our upsets of the week. Blake last week got his upset correct, picked Iowa over Wisconsin. That one hit. Tyler and I did not have much success with ours. Last week in our upset pick of the week, he went with East Carolina over SMU. That one did not hit. And the one that I picked is escaping my head right now. I'll get to that whenever it comes back around to me. But I'll ask you first, Tyler, what is your upset of the week this week?
So I'm going to go with a little bit of a maction. I'm going to go ahead and pick Eastern Michigan to defeat Northern Illinois. I'm going to take the Eagles in this. And speaking of Eagles, quick second, ACC Network, 12 o'clock, Boston College takes on Georgia Tech. Shout out to
baby.
our Eagles. Go Boston College.
Yes, sir. Go Boston College. We are the biggest Boston College truthers in the country, folks. It's what we pride ourselves on here in this Orbit Football Podcast. But Blake, I'll ask you now. You're trying to go back-to-back weeks with the upset pick of the week. What's your upset pick this week?
I certainly am here. Before I get into my upset real quick, I just want to say a quick shout-out to my alma mater, the Miami Redhawks, Miami, Ohio Redhawks, taking on Toledo this weekend in Yager Stadium. Battle between the last two undefeated teams in the MAC. So rise up, Redhawks. Let's go get one here. Let's take control of the MAC. Not just the whole MAC, not even the MAC East as we currently lead, but the whole MAC overall. But now getting into my upset pick, I'm going to go, hopefully to go back-to-back here, I'm going to take Navy over Air Force here. Air Force is going to be without starting quarterback Zach Clarier, it sounds like, for a while. They are turning to Jensen Jones. Tough spot for them. They run the ball well. We'll see if it holds up or not, but with a backup here. But I'm going to take Navy this week, and it's always a close game. So I'm going to take the midshipmen here.
Yeah, and I don't know what's going on with my brain in this episode, but I have not jogged my memory very well because I've just totally forgot that I picked the upset over Air Force last week. I picked Wyoming over Air Force. It's my upset of the week, and Wyoming was a close game, but Air Force did end up winning it. They still are undefeated. Blake's going with the upset this week. But my upset of the week, this is an interesting one. I almost picked, like I said, Auburn over Ole Miss, but I'm switching it here. I'm going Northwestern, an 11.5-point dog, over Nebraska this week. That game is in Lincoln. Interesting matchup of both 3-3 teams in the Big Ten West, but I'm going Wildcats over the Cornhuskers. And before I close it out, Blake wanted to shout out Miami. Well, next week, folks, Tyler and I might get to shout out the MAC school that we support, and that's the Bobcats. We might do a little Battle of the Bricks preview next week. We'll have to see how that goes. But that'll be all for our Week 8 preview. Detailed some of the best 8 games in the country. Make sure to follow us on all of our social medias. Make sure to stay intact. You can follow us on our Twitter and our Instagram. Make sure you can see our reels and our videos there on Twitter, where we really go short with our recap, score predictions, as well as keeping updated in those standings. But that'll be all here for this episode of the Orbit Football Podcast. For Blake, for Tyler, this is Cade, signing off.